I was a founder, entrepreneurship, launched my own firm here. But when you look under it, I was always creating safety nets and really afraid to take that big swing and put myself outside of my comfort zone.
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today.
Only a mother could invest in this idea.
Made this super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
True startup story, guys. You got it. Your company just got seed round financed. Congratulations. You're going to the moon. But now you have to scale. You found great talent out in California, New York, Georgia, and even Eastern Europe. So what communications platform will you be using to ensure your international team is always aligned? Well, the answer is easy. Slack.com for Teams. We've used Slack for all of our previous startups, and they've supported us in tremendous ways. And we want to give them a thanks today for supporting vchunting.com. Did you also know that Slack is a great tool for personal use? Yeah, I use my own personal Slack channel to drop in documents, notes, to-dos, and follow-ups to ensure that my workflow throughout the day is right on course. I promise you, if you try out slack.com for personal use, you'll end up using it for your team as well. Go to slack.com to check it out. Welcome everybody to another episode of VC Hunting with me, Peter Saddington. You guys know that we're always on the hunt for great stories of venture capitalists, and I have a great guest for you guys today. It's David Goldberg of Corigin Ventures. He's the GP there, and they focus on seed stage investments on consumer, prop tech, and marketplaces. He's also a Kaufman Fellow. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just jump right into it because there was something that caught my eye when I went to the Corigin Ventures website. A couple quotes. It said, "Every founder deserves a supportive family." So my first question to drop in on you is this. Do you see when you invest in a founder as them inviting them into your family? And how is that idea kind of emerged?
That's a great question. So I do, but I'll pivot a little bit. I don't view it as much as welcoming them into our family as much as them welcoming us into their family. Right? They've typically been working on their startup for anywhere from a couple months to a couple of years. The bonds that co-founders and employees at a startup have with one another. So I consider it a privilege to be let in. I also think there's what we call the broader extended family, right? Being welcome to join the other 55 at this point, co-founders in our portfolio, what they learn from one another, best practices, shoulders to lean on. It's a pretty special bond.
That's really powerful. And that's really a unique way of, I appreciate that conceit that it's really you being invited into their family, their established kind of trajectory and startup. So it makes a lot of sense. You had an interesting kind of trajectory into venture capital. And I'm going to bring up this idea because it really is apples and oranges here. You spent 3 years as a district attorney for the Brooklyn area. How has this experience as a DA, as a district attorney, helped you become or helped you be a successful venture capitalist?
Yeah, so I guess the easiest answer is probably I'm not sure if it does. I think the hard skills that you learn there around, really understanding the criminal code or how to cross-examine someone on trial, obviously don't translate directly. But two of the skills that you really get to flex there, one is what we called there case management, right? So we would have 200 cases and have to figure out how to work them all in parallel before one or two of them go to trial. You can imagine now where we see, I think last year, 1,400 deals, how to work quickly on all of them to uncover the 6 to 8 best opportunities to then really work quickly on. There's a lot of time management skills that get involved there. And the second thing is the common denominator across both those jobs and really everything in my career is people, right? It's really understanding motivations, skill sets, incentives, working with people either on the same side of the table or often on the other side of the table.
That's really awesome. I could tell, and this is one of the things that I wrote down here in my notes, is that you're really family focused. And that was one of those things where I was like, oh, I kind of get this guy. Because a lot of your tweets, you're talking about family. I think you have two kids. Is that correct?
I do. 1 and 3.
1 and 3. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I just have to bring it up. I just have to bring it up. On last year, on December 25th, you said that you missed your flight because the kids were sick. And then on December 28th, you tweeted, quote, "My first flight with both kiddos. Wish me luck." So how did, I know I got 2 kids. They're a little bit older than yours, 9 and 7. And I remember our first flight distinctively. So tell me, how did that flight go with your kids, your sick kids?
The flight there actually was pretty painless. It was only a 2.5-hour flight. The trip itself and the flight home, I can't quite say the same things. We had a lot of sicknesses and illnesses and delayed flights, and the rest of that trip actually turned out to be quite a disaster. I just thought I'd spare my Twitter audience from hearing my complaining.
Well, sometimes people like to know that stuff. But moving on more to this kind of family context here, on CoriginVentures.com, you wrote that you received your hard work ethic from your mama, which I think a lot of us can probably say the same. And your dad, you said that he was a role model of how a gentleman acts and treats others. Was that one of the impetuses for you to get into Freshneck? And tell us about that startup and what that story is all about.
Sure. So when you talk about how you grow up and your parents and what they do, it's hard to draw direct lines to what you do unless you're obviously going into that business. But I think everything they do shapes who you are, right? The values that you are, the types of careers that you want to choose, the type of person that you want to be. So clearly both of my parents and my upbringing really weighed pretty heavily on who I am as a person and the career choices I've made along the way. I'd say probably my mother more so than anybody, just as she was a scrappy entrepreneur herself, dropped out of college, started working for her father, learned the craft, launched her own business, and then ultimately was the breadwinner in my family for decades, and still has that business today. So, when I launched Freshneck, I was kind of on the corporate wheel at the time. I was working in pretty traditional finance, and like many origination stories, I had my own problem that I tried to solve. Back then, I didn't know much about technology or the venture capital ecosystem, so I started Freshneck as a side project. It started taking off, and I got really good feedback, and eventually I dove in full time and tried to build it into a big business.
So give for those that don't know about Freshneck. So this was acquired in 2014, and what was Freshneck all about? It's fresh, looking fresh. Actually, to be quite frank, I thought you were going to be showing up in a suit and a tie because I was like,
no, I did that for way too long, and now I've gone in the opposite direction here. So Freshneck was a play on the sharing economy, specifically in the apparel space. So while women had Rent the Runway, men didn't really have an option. And I was working in finance, where you wear the same 2 to 3 suits and shirts every day, but you kind of need to switch up the accessories every day. I didn't have the salary to afford really what I wanted. So we started doing these swaps in person. I would bring 3 or 4 things. My colleagues would bring 3 or 4 things. And we would almost do a little bit of a secret Santa swap. And I realized there was a much broader need for this and built out a platform to be able to do this really on a national level. So at Freshneck, we held tens of thousands of items from both top designers like Gucci, Prada, DKNY, Tommy Hilfiger, Brooks Brothers, down to kind of local emerging makers. And we would rent out on a subscription membership basis all types of accessories. So everything from ties and bow ties to sunglasses, jewelry, and watches. Really anything that didn't have a size and fit component, we allowed our members to access versus own.
And so it was acquired in 2014. And I'm just curious because the sharing economy is still growing and burgeoning. I mean, we see obviously stuff with razors and with Birchbox and all sorts of different permutations of this. Why didn't you persist on this idea? I would think that with time and with expansion and with marketing, be pretty daggone successful. So I was curious as to why you decided to offload that and move into your next stage of life.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think there are a couple of factors there. One is around just the business itself. It's a very difficult business, specifically the logistics and the turnaround. And when you're getting involved with apparel and cleaning, most people don't know this, but Rent the Runway is now the nation's largest single dry cleaner.
Really?
A whole nother operation that they need to run. Number two, I think I just wasn't really ready as an entrepreneur, right? I was a first-time founder. I made so many mistakes, that now inform my ability to be able to help many first-time founders and avoiding some of those roadblocks. But it was really hard. And then third, entrepreneurship takes a ton of passion. And I don't know if I was really looking to spend the next decade of my life renting out ties.
That's a fair assessment. I'm going to kind of hang on this one comment you made as a first-time founder. I can harken back quite easily to the first time that I was a quote unquote first-time founder going through the venture process. And I found that in many ways, and I don't want to lead the witness here too much, but I found in that many ways as a first-time founder, I didn't know how to do anything. I didn't know how to build a business, deal with accounting, deal with lawyers, build a team. And I found that there was a huge lacking, especially from seed stage, early stage venture capitalists who may have been founders, but have forgotten all of the nuances, aesthetics, and tactical things that could really have helped me. And so in many ways, as a first-time founder, I was floundering. Did you find that to be a similar experience that, yes, you got venture capital, but in terms of the actual coaching and help and maybe even mentoring that you needed, did you feel like that was lacking?
You are literally telling the origination story of Corigin Ventures. So when my partner and I, Ryan, got together, we were both entrepreneurs at heart. We built very different types of businesses. Myself, a consumer-facing fashion technology business. Ryan, a more traditional brick-and-mortar real estate operating company. But we aligned on all of the things that we got wrong and all of the things that we yearned for. And it had nothing to do with our specific industries. It was all around your basic business foundation building skills, right? How do you think about culture? How do you think about funding and capital sources? How do you think about hiring talent and managing them, building out internal operating systems? So that is the type of value and platform that we've built and try to provide to many of our founders. I find there's two types of strong founders in the venture ecosystem. One is the serial founder. They've been there 3 times. They already know how to take a company from 0 to X. And regardless of what sector they're going into, they then probably try and hire out industry experts to then fill in those gaps. The other type is a first-time founder who probably doesn't know how to do those foundational things, but is an industry expert, has a very unique perspective, ideally a competitive advantage, and then we help fill that gap into the basic business building.
Did you know that there's even more value than just audio or video? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at VC Hunting, and make sure to sign up for the VC Hunting newsletter, where you'll be able to get weekly news on venture capital, startups, founder stories, and the occasional wisdom extracted from Peter's brain. Go to vchunting.com to sign up. And now back to the episode.
That's really crucial. I think that's one of my biggest complaints. And I find in many ways that many of the venture capitalists who have started, scout funds or early stage funds really is in some ways, I was going to use the word reaction, but I'm hoping that they're more thoughtful about it. In many ways, they start their funds as a response to the poor experiences that they had in the past. And it's like, yeah, I could do this better. Would you agree that could kind of summarize up the reasoning, maybe one of the reasons why you started your own fund?
I would. And so I am certainly an investor, but I still consider myself a founder. And in the way that most founders start companies to solve their own problems, I started Corigin Ventures to address what I thought was a gap in the market that I personally experienced firsthand as a founder.
Awesome. Well, let's talk more about Corigin Ventures, because as I did some research on this, I was really intrigued. Your model isn't ridiculously unique, but it is unique in and of itself. Let's talk about this no fund, this what you call a quote no fund, no LPs. You're investing off your own balance sheet. How does this work? Number one, and number two, why?
Yeah, so it's interesting you actually note that actually probably comes off an old website. So that was our original model in Fund 1 from 2012 through 2016. So that was, we were just investing GP capital. Our first fund was $20 million. It was really a proof of concept fund to prove out to us that our value proposition resonated, as well as to founders that we can actually help them and had something novel in the market. And I think our original thought there was that there were tons of advantages of not also having to run the structure of our own traditional GP/LP fund. I think what we got to realizing over time is while there's certain advantages there, there's also some handicaps, and there's a ton of advantages that come with actually building out a traditional LP base, right? One, having permanent capital allowing you to lead rounds versus just participate.
Right.
Strategic LPs that can actually come in and help either with diligence or business development, as they are all typically business leaders and industry experts and something else as well. And then it also gives us a revenue stream to beef up our own infrastructure. So while we started here as 2 partners doing everything up and down the stack, today we're 6 people and come with all types of specialists.
Okay. Well, so then I'm glad I brought it up. That was on your Corigin Ventures FAQ website. So might want to update.
I got to check that out.
I might want to update that to be a little bit fresher, I suppose. No pun intended with the freshness. Yeah. So let's talk about this theme and the theme around family and self-discovery, because I'll tell you, man, on January 23rd, so we're going back a little bit here. On January 23rd, 2017, you wrote a fantastic blog article that I had to read twice to really consume. The title of this was My VC Reboot, and I'm sure that can speak to it, but let me lay some context here. I love this blog post because you talked about your experiences of going to the VC retreat boot camp. And to summarize some of the things that you experienced there, that you had to push, number one, you had to push yourself to go. You kind of had to break through resistance to actually go and challenge yourself. And you were dealing with suppressed emotions versus controlled emotions, not challenging yourself and not always being present. And I want to talk about these, but the first thing I want to talk about is you wrote that you hesitated on writing the application section on the blog post because your emotions were too raw at the time from all the experiences you had. And so I'm wondering, 2 years later, 2.5, 3 years later, do you have an application section now? Have you learned something that you took from the VC boot camp that you've applied and have made your life better?
So certainly, I mean, that was, I think it's not too light to say that was actually a really life-changing experience. And it's amazing to think that it was really only over 72 hours.
I love it.
I don't look at it as it's so directly as like those 72 hours, I learned everything that I needed to learn. And now it's about applying. It was really the first major step of like dipping that first toe into the self-discovery waters, and that led to me then applying to the Kaufman Fellowship, which is a little bit more of an expanded 2-year program into understanding who I wanted to be as an investor, how I wanted to act as a human. So yes, it's been incredible. I'd probably have to think harder really into the applications. I think it's around, mostly around like being intentional around the people I surround myself with, where I want to play in terms of, in the venture ecosystem, the types of companies that I want to invest in, and the type of role that I want to have.
So give us a little bit more context around this VC boot camp. Tell us, so what was the story that led up to it? What was the impetus to finally make you go, hey, this is something I need to do? So tell us, what is it all about?
Yeah, it probably started with a bit of a misconception on my part. When I first read about it, I thought it was a lot more sort of content-based boot camp on how to be a better investor. I was in a very fortunate position when I came to Corigin. I was given a lot of autonomy and a lot of power, and I had to learn trial by fire. Now, the downside of that is I didn't have, a 30-year experienced mentor, at a tier 1 firm that's been here for, decades to learn from. So I would often go to the external world for mentorship. And so I figured this would be, hey, great time to learn from an incredible investor like Jerry Colonna, 30 other VCs descending and spending quality time with one another. So that's what initially got me intrigued. Now, when I started doing some references and speak to some other folks, I realized that was not the case. And this was a much deeper, as Jerry calls it, an exercise in radical self-inquiry and really understanding yourself, what drives you, what is holding you back. As he would say, how are you complicit in the conditions that you say that you don't want, not to get too deep to anybody. And so I'd say the final real inflection point, honestly, was reading a blog post by fellow investor Steve Schlafman, who went to the first iteration of VC Reboot. I went to the second. And then I grabbed coffee with him, and he shared his experience and how he felt before and how he felt after. And it became clear that I owed it to myself to try this out.
That's really awesome. I find that, and this seems to be a common theme of all the venture capitalists that I talk to. At some level, being a venture capitalist, I think it is almost part and parcel of the job, that at times you feel the whole imposter syndrome of like, what am I doing here? I used to be purposeful. I used to be a founder. I used to have an idea, and then I got acquired and I got comfortable, and then I somehow fell into VC, and now I'm coaching all these guys. But what am I doing with my life? Is that similar? Did you have a similar experience in there, or was this just?
Yes, I did, and I probably still do. I'd argue that founders probably share that imposter syndrome as well.
Totally.
I think it even goes way beyond the venture ecosystem, but it's probably exacerbated in what we do, and that we need to put ourselves out as thought leaders and experts, and we need to be able to help people, and I think in truth, being self-aware of that is really, really important, to understand what your lane is, where you can help, where you should just be getting out of the way in the investor, and maybe when you just need to be receptive to listening and hearing rather than trying to sort of impart wisdom on somebody else.
I think it's very fair. And not only that, I think that's very wise a way that you communicated this. At the end of the day, so much of our experience are highly relative and highly contextual to the variables of that time. And so it's sometimes I even find that it's hard to translate. Hey, I was a founder, I was successful. Therefore, the answer is therefore nothing. The only thing I can do really is ask you great questions, have conversations with you, and help you bleed out that which in many ways is already in your gut. I find that when I work with founders, they already kind of sort of know what they need to do. As an investor, I'm not a VC, but as an angel, for me, it's just, hey, do it. If this is what your gut is, let me be the sounding board. Let me be the guy that asks you great questions around it. But at the end of the day, I did it differently. And so in a lot of ways, as a coach and a venture capitalist, you have to kind of allow the founders to fail on their own and experience that on their own. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I believe that former founders have a competitive advantage as investors, but I don't think it's because we have all the answers to give to founders. I think it's just because we have the empathy to understand what they're going through. Right. And at the end of the day, this is a service industry. This is a relationship business, especially at the early stages. So just having someone that they believe creates a safe space for them to be able to talk to, maybe work through some of their own ideas. And just like, if you talk to an executive coach, they're not going to give you the answers. You want the answers, but they're not going to give them. They're going to give you the tools and the space to hopefully work out the answers on your own.
So in terms of your self-discovery, this is something that you and I, and probably hopefully the rest of the world, will continue to strive in understanding thyself and understanding who we are and our purpose on this planet. Since 2007, from the VC boot camp and obviously going into Kaufman Fellow, becoming a Kaufman Fellow, what would you say is one of the things that you've discovered about yourself that surprised you?
That's a great question. I think I always considered myself to have a much higher risk tolerance than I actually do. And I think that came from, I would switch jobs. I was a founder, entrepreneurship, launched my own firm here. But when you look under it, I was always creating safety nets and really afraid to take that big swing and put myself outside of my comfort zone. And that's something I've been working on now for the last 2 to 3 years.
So what's something recently, if I may ask, what's something recently that you've done that's kind of moved you past your comfort zone and you experienced something new? Did you have a story like that or an experience like that as of recent?
Two of the things that I have been sort of testing out for the last couple of years has been really things around mental health. So one, therapy, something that a lot of people don't talk about, but I now see a therapist, and I think it's really a game changer in helping me understand myself. And two, meditation.
Ooh, tell me more. What have you gained through meditation? By the way, to give you context, I have tried, and you read the books, you watch the YouTubes, and they're like, everything I'll say you've already heard, but I just can't do it. So maybe you have a tip for me.
Yeah, so I was you. I probably still am you. I'm certainly no guru. It actually led me, my meditation journey led me to an investment here that we made at Corigin Ventures, which is called Core Meditation. And Core provides this really incredible hardware device. It's a meditation trainer that pairs with their app. Their whole value proposition is targeting you, and it's targeting me, as it's really, really hard to understand meditation, to start out with meditation, and to know if you're doing it right and doing it well. So by giving you a physical device that actually centers you, it then has sensors and biometrics to then vibrate alongside your breathing, so you know the timing and the strength of doing it well, and then it reads your own biometrics to know your heart rate, how many minutes you're spending in calm. So I've been using that for the last couple of months. And I'd say I'm probably 2 times better than I was at it in terms of staying engaged and length of time, though I still have some room of growth there.
That's awesome. You know, I'd love to be able to, I wrote the note down here, Core Meditation. So I'm definitely going to be checking it out. So there's a plug for your in portfolio investment there. One of the things that I was thinking about, and it kind of rose up in my gut as I was doing research, is a lot of people have spent time looking back at the past decade and saying, you know, where did 2010 to 2020 go? And one of the things that rose up in my gut for you, David Goldberg, was, where do you think venture capital is going to be heading in the next decade? It's a very broad question, but I'd love for you to add your own context and your own spice to it. So where's Corigin Ventures going to be heading in the next decade or so? And what is something that you're really excited about that's coming up in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that may be a little bit controversial here. I don't think it changes that much. You know, I think as technologists and people who are investing in these game-changing ideas and industries being flipped on their head, like the taxi industry or hotel industry, but in reality, you know, and we even see it businesses we look at and industries we invest in, like old school industries, especially service industries that are relationship-driven, change much slower. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I think there's this desire to start layering on technology and data and automate a lot of what we do. But I think that's when you lose the authenticity, the humans behind it. So I think it actually stays somewhat the same. I'm also a believer that, like, even a lot of our portfolio companies, we really coach them and urge them to get really, really good at something, to flex those muscles and to do it 1,000 times and become an expert. Everybody wants to move on to that next thing as soon as you started getting good at the first thing. Get great at it first, become the best, and then move on. So before I think about, like, what is the next iteration of Corigin, I just want to get really, really good at what we do at our core.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What would you say would be one of your secret sauces to Corigin Ventures and the way that you deploy capital, but not only deploy capital, but support founders?
I think it's the people, right? To us, a firm is really just a collection of individuals. And if I'm proud of anything, it's 6 individuals that I've recruited here and inspired to work here who believed in our mission. The feedback that I get from founders about the time and effort and true, authentic care that my team members put into their work is off the charts. And I think that's the differentiator. I think if you're betting on being smarter than somebody else, there's a lot of smart people in this industry. But, you know, hard work, empathy, and passion will take you a long way.
I love it. Yeah. When it comes to this industry, there's no shortage of ridiculously intelligent individuals. So whenever I hear that someone's a guru, I'm like, probably not. There's probably someone else that's far more educated and far more insightful than them. You know, let's talk briefly, just a couple more questions and we'll let you go.
Sure.
But in terms of Corigin Ventures, you guys are focusing on consumer prop tech marketplaces. However, I've seen on your Twitter, on the Twitter, that you've dabbled in some crypto. So why not cryptocurrency?
Oh man, my dabbling in crypto is very light.
You were complaining about Coinbase in one tweet, I remember.
Yeah, just buying some cryptocurrency. So I have not personally invested in any blockchain companies. I've never done any ICOs. I mean, at the end of the day, I come from a wealth management background, so I believe in asset allocation. So having a small exposure, I think makes a lot of sense. I am not the one to make bold predictions about what happens in the future.
I'll make sure to have
I will say
a quote of you saying that Bitcoin's going to hit 50,000 in the next.
No, that will not come from me. I'm no prognosticator, and I'd be weary of anybody who makes those types of declarations.
So you're focusing on consumer prop tech and marketplaces. What drew your thesis to that? And obviously theses are meant in many ways to constrain focus. And so what are the reasons that you're focusing on consumer prop tech and marketplace? What excites you about that?
Yeah, so I think one, it comes from the backgrounds of the founders. So we are now a 3-partner firm. 2 of us come from consumer backgrounds. 1 of us comes from a real estate technology background. So we believe that we have some competitive advantages here, both in our experience and our networks. And it's also a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you start investing in companies, you learn that way. The best founders then see it on your website, and then they come to you. So what may have started as something that we dabbled in has now become something that we've doubled and tripled down on.
Awesome. Yeah. And considering that you want to master that and be really good at that, that makes a lot of sense. Final question here before we let you go. This is an intriguing tweet of sorts. On November 28th, 2019, I really was curious about this. On November 28th, 2019, you said, "I'm grateful for my family, my team at Corigin Ventures, founders, health, physical and mental. I'm not grateful for Frozen 2. That was shit. The New York Knicks also shit." What's wrong? What was wrong with Frozen 2, David? What's going on?
Wow, I got to start curating my Twitter a little bit better. It's going to be used against me there. So one thing that I believe in, I'll just say, when it comes to either social media or even my blog, it is not very curated. It's very stream of consciousness. I try to be as authentic and open and honest as possible.
Which is good.
Really, in a way, not that there's any wisdom in those tweets, but try and impart to some of the things that I've learned, and open it up to the wider founder base. I also believe that humans are behind everything what we do. So for people to get to know me as a person, like it or not, I kind of put it all out there. Long story short, my 3-year-old daughter walked out and cried in the movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought Frozen 2 was supposed to be family friendly. What happened?
Very dark. Very dark.
Maybe too dark for your taste. Yeah. And the New York Knicks, I think we can pretty much.
That doesn't really need any explanation. I grew up in New Jersey. I've now lived in New York City for almost 20 years. It's been really tough.
So you grew up in Jersey. So what exit?
Oh man, 145.
Ooh, there you go. A true New Jerseyan right there. I spent my early years up in New Jersey, West Windsor, Plainsboro. So nice. I understand the area well. So thanks so much, David Goldberg. This was really insightful, a life-giving conversation. I'm going to give you the last word. Where can the world out there, because we're syndicating all over the place, where can the world find out more about Corigin Ventures and you?
Oh, awesome. Quick plug. So I'd say learn more about our firm at our website, www.coriginventures.com. We do a lot to put all of our information of what we invest in and how to get in touch with us on our website. And then, of course, if you want to learn about basketball or children's movies, follow me on Twitter at David R. Goldberg.
Perfect. Which, by the way, I will say for everyone out there listening and watching, Corigin Ventures, if you go there, they're very transparent about their process. And it might seem small because a lot of venture companies say they're transparent. They're not. It's a Corigin Ventures on the website. You guys have really outlined, hey, this is how we work. This is how we do diligence. This is what you're going to expect. And those types of things go a long way. Thanks so much, David, for joining the show. I look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you, Peter. This was fun.
True startup story time. Guys, as a founder, I'm often asked, what are my go-to tools and technology that I use as I begin a startup? Well, that's easy. One of them is Dropbox. Dropbox is the easiest way to ensure that all your files and documents are synced on all devices, whether it be mobile, your local desktop, or remote. We want to thank Dropbox for supporting vchunting.com, and make sure to get your 30-day trial free at dropbox.com/business. Wow. Well, that was a fun interview with David Goldberg of Corigin Ventures, general partner. One of the things that I really appreciated about my research on David is that, and I wish, to be quite frank, I wish we had spent a little bit more time on it, but he really, through the Twitter and through all the research and his writing, really is a family man. And I wish I could spend more time. I wish I could have spent more time talking with him about how much, I guess, just if I were to say it simply, how much he loves his family and how his family is such an integral part to his life, his work, and his profession. And for me, as I would say, not a perfect family man, but someone who tries my best to be present, to be intentional with my kids, be loving with my wife, all these great things. I generally resonate with other guys, let's just put it that way, other guys who really put it out there and say, hey, look, this is my family, I'm proud of them, I'm proud of them, I love on them, I dote on them, this is where my priorities are at. And that's the feeling that I got doing some research on David, but I wish we could have spent some more time digging into that, because that's the stuff that really matters. We could talk about venture capital, we can talk about founder woes, we could talk about our experiences being founders and not being supported by early stage investors and these types of things. We can talk about our own journeys into self-understanding and self-discovery, but at the end of the day, man, just as David had said multiple times throughout our interview, it's all about relationships. And so I can really understand, I can really get that, and I can really grasp that from David. One of the things that I appreciated is his story around Fresh Neck and talking about how he had gotten his work ethic from his mother, and maybe even his, I guess he didn't say this, but maybe I can interject here and say that maybe he got his style from his papa there. But the subscription system, the subscription things like Dollar Shave Club and Birchbox and these types of systems are really burgeoning. And I was really curious about why he had stopped that, but it allowed him to get where he is now as a GP, growing and helping other founders reach their dreams and build some amazing things. He's got 55 co-founders in the family now, and he seems to be doing quite well. I hope that you guys weren't offended by the Frozen comments. Apparently, I haven't seen the movie yet, by the way. I should probably do a little bit more diligence on that, and I know that my kids have. But apparently, if you're out there and you don't like dark movies, Frozen 2 might not be the place that you need to go, or the movie that you need to watch. One of the things that I wish we had also spent time on, and that's okay, we can invite David on again in the future, which is always possible, is I wanted to spend some more time talking about the VC Reboot boot camp. I'm a big fan of self-discovery. I'm a big fan of understanding kind of who you are and where you lie in the whole worldscape of sorts. Because it's so important. You guys might have been hearing me talk about this on our daily show, Venture Daily, but I've been meditating a lot, using that word, which I'm not very good at actually, but when I say meditating, I really mean thinking. I've been thinking a lot about kind of the nobility of work and how there's a lot of nobility in the act of working and living out your purpose. And I was hoping that we could talk a little bit more about how he had to push himself to go to this event. I think many of us hesitate when it comes to new experiences sometimes and wondering if it's actually going to be worth it. I loved his writing, and you guys can find this more on the blog later, which you can find on vchunting.com/David Goldberg if you're interested. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the not always being present, not challenging yourself, and maybe even suppressing your emotions, and how this type of self-discovery is really powerful, and understanding how you act, how you behave, that could be contradictory to the goals that you have in mind. Sometimes we have these goals and these aspirations and these visions of what we want to do, but yet at the same time, we have habits and destructive behaviors that preclude us or don't allow us to really reach our goals. And sometimes going to these boot camps, and sometimes and even just talking with a mentor or someone who can poke into your life is really powerful, because it can help you realize your blind spots, where you're weak and where you might need to remove things or maybe even improve. And so this is one of those topics that I wanted to dig in just a little bit more with him. In terms of the application section of it, he's still living it out. He's still trying to be a great dad, a great husband, a great father, and obviously doing his best for his founders that he's invested in. Guys, I enjoyed this conversation a lot. I hope it was life-giving and fruitful to you. If you want more information on David Goldberg, feel free to go to vchunting.com David Goldberg. Guys, it's been a pleasure to have this interview. I hope it was fun, and we'll see you next time, guys.